Go on here real quick and talk about something that I thought was important for the day. Um, as we prepare for Feast of Unleavened Bread, I was reminded that today is the 10th of Aviv, and so wanted to just look at a couple things in the spirit of preparation. So if we look over here in Exodus, Shemot, chapter 12, verse 1, where it says, "And Yahweh spoke to Moshe and to Aaron in the land of Mitzrayim, saying, The new moon is the beginning of new moons for you. It is the first new moon of the year for you. Speak to all the congregation of Israel, saying, On the 10th day of this new moon, each one of them is to take for himself a lamb according to the house of his father, a lamb for a household. And if the household is too small for the lamb, let him and his neighbor next to his house take it according to the number of the beings, according to each man's need. You make your count for the lamb. Let the lamb be a perfect one, a year-old male. Take it from the sheep or from the goats." Okay, so today actually is the 10th day of the first biblical year. The 10th day of the first biblical month. And so in this day, the Passover, the sacrifice, was chosen. By the way, the Passover is the sacrifice. The Passover is the sacrifice. We call Feast of Unleavened Bread Passover. We call the night before the Feast of Unleavened Bread Passover. But in all actuality, Passover is the actual sacrifice. And so on this day, when Passover was instituted, the sacrifice, we make it easier by just saying the sacrifice is chosen. The sacrifice that was going to be used for the blood smearing on the doorpost, the sign on the doorpost and on the lintels for the death angel to pass over them, the sacrifice was chosen on the 10th day. And so what I wanted to just kind of think about was the idea of choosing your sacrifice. And so it gives you, credentials for the sacrifice, right? It had to be this year-old lamb without spot or blemish. It had to be this perfect sacrifice. And so it causes us to have to look at Yeshua, first of all, and understand who Yeshua is. Not have this kind of false idea of who the Savior is. When we think about the idea of, I heard some people talking about helping regular Christian people to understand the Passover, and then having kind of the Seder meal with people who've never had it before, who know about Yeshua or the Bible, and who they will call Jesus. Every time people who don't know about Passover kind of experience an official Seder, it's like a mind blowing, life changing experience because they're understanding to a more, to a fuller degree what it is Yeshua did for them and his overall kind of significance in the scriptures. And part of the thing that's going on when they're doing that is getting a better understanding as to who Yeshua is. And so when we think about kind of spiritualizing the text, which we have to do because we're looking at the Torah and gaining a spiritual understanding from it. And so when we spiritualize this text over here, is Exodus 12:3-5, and think about the idea of choosing a lamb. They did this this was done every year. Right? Every year you went out and you found a lamb that was perfect. You inspected it and then chose it and then took it and held it. Right? And so when we think about how we do this today, the same thing is true. When we think about who Yeshua is, when we think about what it is that he actually did come to do, and kind of from this kind of rehearsal mindset of going through these things, because the feast days really they help us to understand what it is Yeshua did for us anyway. And so when we go through these things, right, it helps us to understand the plan that the Most High has for us in regards to our salvation. Mm-hmm. So a way to better grow in these things is to actually look at these things from that spiritual perspective and then rehearsing these things and gaining that spiritual understanding. So when we think about the idea of inspecting the lamb, looking at Messiah and understanding what he truly is, how are we doing that? Are we doing that? Let's look at a couple verses real quick. Let me pull up. Let's see here. Look in the book of John. John, let's see, chapter 6. I'm just going to start reading. John chapter 6, verse, let's see, start reading at 53, where it says, Yeshua therefore said to them, truly, truly, I say to you, unless you eat the flesh of the son of Adam and drink his blood, you possess no life in yourselves. He who eats my flesh and drinks my blood possesses everlasting life, and I shall raise him up in the last day. For my flesh is truly food, and my blood is truly drink. He who eats my flesh and drinks my blood stays in me, and I in him. And so when we think about this, if we think about this now kind of in just like the practical sense of it, because, from a spiritual standpoint, Yeshua was talking about himself and those that were following after him to eat his flesh and drink his blood. We learn later what the significance of that is, right? But when we think about eating his flesh and drinking his blood, that's what we go through with the whole Passover situation, right? And so again, from a practical situation, those of us that can see, that can literally see, like I anyway, when I eat something, I'm looking at it. Right? The first thing I want to do is the thing probably should look appetizing to me. I'm inspecting the thing. I check it out. I look at it. Does it look good? Does it even look like something that I would want to eat? Right? I'm looking at it, the presentation of it. Right? and then I eat it, and then I taste it, and I chew it up, and I ingest it, right? And so when we think about Messiah and who he is, the same thing is true, right? We have to go into our kind of our relationship with Messiah. We can't go into it blindly. We have to understand what it is that we're doing in order for it to actually mean anything for us, right? And so Yeshua over here is talking to these people over here in terms of eating his body, his flesh, and drinking his blood, becoming one with him, right? Letting Messiah just come inside of you and actually becoming one with you. And so that again, looking at this from a spiritual perspective, this is what we're kind of looking at when we think about this idea of even just choosing the lamb, understanding who Yeshua is, doing the kind of inspection of Yeshua and understanding who he is fully, being sure that we know the ins and outs of Messiah. Because again, we look back at Exodus, when you were choosing your sacrifice, you had to inspect it to even know um, if it was, how old it was, and if it was a perfect one. Did you ever look at the scriptures to even know if Yeshua was the perfect sacrifice? I wonder if you ever did that before. If you didn't do that, maybe that's something that you should redo every year. Is inspect Messiah when we get to this 10th day of the month, right? How we can spiritually apply this Exodus 12:3-5, just to be able to fully understand who the master is, because you're about to eat him. You're about to eat him in a few days. Do you even understand who he is? Do you even understand what he did for you? All of the different, maybe not even all, just a lot of the significances that he has presented to you, right? I think that when we look at this 10th day of the month, this is something that we can be engaging in terms of inspecting the sacrifice, understanding to a fuller perspective who he is and what it is exactly that he's done for you, and being sure and knowing that he meets the qualifications that are given in the scriptures, that it is an appropriate sacrifice on this 10th day of the first biblical month of the year. Another thing, that we think about, in this preparation, we always look at First Corinthians chapter 11 on this, at the Seder day, at the day that we're taking the eating the body and drinking the blood. But I think a more appropriate time to do it is now. To here, let me just read the verses here. First Corinthians 11:27-28, which say, so that whoever should eat this bread and drink this cup of the master unworthily shall be guilty of the body and blood of the master. But let a man examine himself, and so let him eat of that bread and drink of that cup. 29, for the one who is eating and drinking unworthily eats and drinks judgment to himself, not discerning the body of the master. And so another thing that we add to the equation over here is not only understanding the sacrifice, but having an understanding within your own self to know if you're even worthy of partaking in the sacrifice. Right? So not only at this time do we have to think about, should we be thinking about the master Yeshua, and does he meet the criteria, but do you meet the criteria to even partake? And in your wanting and desiring to be worthy, what steps are you taking in your situation to get yourself to be worthy? Um, we think about preparing for Passover. One of the things that we do is get the leaven out of our homes. And so not only are we getting the sacrifice, not only are we going out and finding the lamb and bringing the lamb into our home, but also we're going around making sure that we have all of the leaven uh, ready to be taken out of the home at the appropriate time. And so again, we think about leaven and all that. Of course, that's sin, right? That exemplifies sin. And so we really have to, at this time in preparation, when we have a few days before we get there, take this time now. When we're sitting at the Seder, it's not the time to sit up there and think about, where your life is right now. You should have been already did that starting right now, right? Now's the time for you to now look at your situation. You have days to do it and kind of do some kind of self-reflecting and look introspective examination of yourself to make sure that you're getting all of these leavens and things out of your home, your spiritual body, right? Your physical um, body that is the home of your spiritual man. Now's the time that you should be doing that right now. Starting at this 10th day of the month, moving forward, right? When we think about Yeshua, when he was saying those words over there in John chapter 6 and 53, he was inspecting his own disciples, and he charged them with a hard word at that time to see who it was that was going to follow him or not. Right, his true disciples heard that hard word, and they kept on going. Right, but the ones who was just kind of Johnny come lately, that weren't rooted and established in him, those ones fell off. They heard those words, and they failed to see the spiritual significance or even trust in who Yeshua was, because maybe the ones who stayed didn't know what the spiritual significance was, but they knew enough about Yeshua to know that whatever it was that he was talking about, they didn't know what he was talking about, but whatever it was that he was talking about, it must have been okay. And so at the very least, they had enough trust in Messiah to be able to move forward with whatever it was that he was doing, regardless of their full understanding of the matter. And that just speaks to the trust that they had in Messiah. And so, thinking about this time, we have to look at ways in which we're able to strengthen our trust in Messiah, because that strengthens our faith. Right, so we have to be able to establish ways to fortify our faith and trust in him. And again, what better way to do that than to, investigate into who he is, right? And so we come to find out that the ones that stayed, those are the ones that we know about, right? Those are the ones who had that uh, intimate relationship with Messiah, right? And so, we can see that is kind of a key ingredient in this whole idea of knowing and understanding who Messiah is as the sacrifice, right? And so again, the as we look at ourselves as we look at ourselves, we kind of are can be doing this one thing. I mean, two things simultaneously. We understand Messiah more, which helps us to understand ourselves more, right? And which puts us in a place to be able to remove sin um, from ourselves more, right? All these things kind of interconnect with each other. But, I'm saying all of that just to say that in this time, on this 10th day of the month, we want to now kind of hone in on these times in preparation, right? Within the commands for these feast days, we have preparation involved in that, right? Getting everything in order. Um, you know, Looking for, asking the Most High to show us where the leaven lies, right? And digging that stuff out. And Tirsa was just over there looking beside the refrigerator. She found all kinds of stuff I thought was thrown away, was hidden beside the refrigerator. And right, we could look at that from a spiritual perspective. Things that you thought in your life was you been got rid of, guess what? It's still sitting right over there because you never did anything with it. You just put some stuff on top of it. But if you don't go and inspect, if you don't go and look, if you don't ask the Most High to open up your eyes and show you and shine light in those dark places in your situation, it's just gonna be there until next time.
Stay there till next year.
That's just gonna be sitting right over there, right? And so just real quick, I just wanted to, come on here and kind of ask that, people, take full advantage of these times and these seasons. Just because we had our sacrifice and Yeshua's our forever sacrifice, don't mean that we can't look at this verse 3 through 5 of chapter 12 of Exodus and have this thing be real in our lives even right now. Because by us looking to Messiah, who is our sacrifice, and seeking to understand him on a greater level, how you wrong for doing that? Right? It could only make your situation better by trying to understand him better, because that's going to help your life experience be better, because you are closer to the master, right? Because you understand him better. And so I think that it's important for us to take, again, like I said, full advantage of these times and these seasons, and do all of the things that we can do to kind of make these things more rich in our lives, with the end result being that we become more and more in the likeness of the Master Yeshua. Okay, so I just wanted to real quick just hit you with that. And I hope that everyone goes here and take heed to these words and do some introspection and look for that leaven, and look at the characteristics of the Lamb and seek to understand who Messiah is to a greater degree that you've never seen before, so that you're able to move closer to that goal of maturity, as the master has instructed for us. Okay, so that being said, shalom.